The Great Hall of Blackwood University was a cathedral of wealth and influence, its vaulted ceilings echoing with the delicate clinking of champagne flutes and the murmur of self-congratulation. Marble statues of long-dead founders stood in silent judgment over the living, their stone eyes gazing upon a sea of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos, light fractured by a constellation of crystal chandeliers, danced across polished floors and expensive jewelry, creating an atmosphere so rarefied it felt almost unreal. In this world, perception was reality, and the uniform one wore was the ultimate measure of one's worth. And so, Elara Vance, in her simple gray maintenance uniform, was functionally invisible. She moved along the perimeter of the gala, a quiet ghost in a machine of opulence. Her presence acknowledged only when she was needed. Her task tonight was simple: to be a shadow, to clean up the messes the glittering people left behind, to ensure the fantasy of perfection remained unbroken. Her face, etched with a quiet resilience, held no trace of bitterness. She was an observer, a silent witness to a pageant of vanity she had long ago learned to tune out. Near a towering column of Italian marble, a guest had spilled a glass of red wine. Elara approached with a practiced, unhurried grace, her cart of supplies gliding silently behind her. As she knelt, the fabric of her utilitarian trousers pressing against the cold floor, a voice, slick with arrogance, cut through the ambient chatter. "Careful, darling," boomed Marcus Thorne, a real estate tycoon whose donations to the university were as large as his ego. He was speaking to his wife Amelia, a woman draped in diamonds and disdain. "Don't brush against the help. Might get diligence on your dress." A ripple of cruel, knowing laughter emanated from his small circle of admirers. Marcus, emboldened, turned his attention directly to Elara. His smile was a predatory thing, condescending curve of his lips. He leaned down, not to help, but to loom. "It must be difficult," he said, his voice a syrupy mix of false pity and genuine scorn. "Watching all this success, knowing it's a world you can never be a part of. But then I suppose someone has to scrub the floors." Elara did not flinch. She did not look up. Her hands remained steady as she blotted the deep red stain from the pristine white marble. The wine looked like blood against the stone. She focused on the task, on the circular motion of the cloth, on the slow disappearance of the blemish. The world Marcus Thorne inhabited was loud, but her silence was a fortress he could not breach. When the stain was gone, she rose to her feet, her back straight, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a gesture of subservience, but one of simple, professional closure. She turned and walked away, the soft squeak of her rubber-soled shoes the only sound she left in her wake. Across the room, the university's president, Mr. Henderson, a man whose wisdom was as evident as the fine lines around his kind eyes, watched the entire exchange. A profound disappointment settled upon him. He knew who Elara Vance was. Personally overseen her hiring, had read the heavily redacted file that spoke of a life lived far beyond the confines of this gilded cage. He knew the secret she carried beneath that simple gray jacket. They thought she was just a janitor, someone to be ignored and ridiculed. They had no idea they were in the presence of a hero. If you believe true worth lies within, that the content of a person's character is more important than the clothes they wear, then you know this story is important. The evening wore on, a symphony of polite conversation and strategic networking. Speeches were delivered from a brightly lit stage, each one praising the virtues of philanthropy and community, the words floating like hollow bubbles over the heads of the assembled guests. Marcus Thorne was in his element, soaking in the adulation. His chest puffed out with the pride of a man who equated his net worth with his moral worth. He was slated to receive a humanitarian award later in the evening for a recent and very public donation to the university's business school. The irony was a palpable, bitter presence in the air, a taste that only a few like Mr. Henderson could discern. As the program moved towards its crescendo, Marcus spotted Elara again. She was near the stage, kneeling to carefully tape down a loose microphone cable, her focus absolute as she ensured the safety of the speakers who would soon stand there. Seeing her presented an opportunity he couldn't resist. a chance to perform another act of his magnanimous and deeply condescending charity. He strode towards her, his expensive leather shoes clicking importantly on the floor. He made sure to raise his voice so that those nearby could bear witness to his largesse. "And let us not forget the people who truly make these nights possible," he announced, a grand, sweeping gesture taking in the entire hall, but his eyes fixed on Elara, the unsung heroes in the background. Several heads turned. Marcus reached into his pocket and produced a crisp $100 bill, holding it between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were a rare treat for a pet. He bent down and tried to press it into Elara's hand. "Here," he said, his voice booming with false sincerity. "For all your hard work?" The gesture was designed for maximum humiliation, a public display that reinforced the chasm between their two worlds. It was not a gift, it was a branding, but Elara did not take it. She slowly looked up from the cable. She looked at the bill. Then, at Marcus Thorne's manicured hand, and then, for the first time, she looked directly into his eyes. Her gaze was not angry, nor was it fearful. It was unnervingly clear, like deep still water. With a quiet and deliberate movement, she gently pushed his hand away. "No, thank you, sir," she said. Her voice was soft, yet it carried an astonishing weight, cutting through the nearby chatter and creating a pocket of sudden, intense silence. "I am compensated for my work." Marcus was taken aback, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He was not used to being refused, especially by someone he considered to be so far beneath him. The small crowd that had gathered was now watching with keen interest, the script of the evening having suddenly and deliciously gone astray. Mr. Henderson, seeing the confrontation from his table near the front, felt a surge of protective anger. He began to rise, knowing the moment he had both dreaded and anticipated was rapidly approaching. He remembered the day he had interviewed Elara for the maintenance position. She had sat in his cavernous, oak-paneled office, her posture erect, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She had asked for nothing but a quiet job, a place where she could work and be left alone. "No fuss," she had said. He had looked at the file on his desk, a document that spoke of fire and courage, of leadership under unimaginable pressure. He had looked at the humble, stoic woman before him and had granted her request without hesitation. He knew the world, had made enough fuss over Elara Vance. Now, watching Marcus Thorne's arrogant charade, he knew the quiet was about to be broken. The pivotal moment of the evening had arrived. The lights in the grand hall dimmed, leaving only the stage bathed in a brilliant, expectant glow. Mr. Henderson walked to the podium, the weight of what he was about to do settling on his shoulders. A hush fell over the audience. Marcus Thorne sat at his front row table, preening, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He leaned towards his wife, whispering, "This is it. Get ready to applaud, my dear," loudly. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his kind eyes scanning the faces in the crowd, before they came to rest for a moment on Elara, who was standing by the side of the stage, ready to assist if needed, a silent figure in the wings. "Good evening," the president began, his voice warm but firm, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Tonight we have celebrated philanthropy and ambition, but I want to speak for a moment about a different set of virtues. I want to speak about service, about sacrifice, and about a form of humility so profound it actively shuns the spotlight." Paused, letting the words sink in. Night. We are honored to present the inaugural Guardian Scholarship. The scholarship will provide a full 4-year education to the children of fallen soldiers. It is a gift of immense generosity, a promise that the sacrifices of their parents will never be forgotten. A wave of polite applause rippled through the hall. Marcus clapped along, a look of smug anticipation on his face, certain this was all an elaborate preamble to his own award. The pivotal moment of the evening had arrived. The lights in the grand hall dimmed, leaving only the stage bathed in a brilliant, expectant glow. Mr. Henderson walked to the podium, the weight of what he was about to do settling on his shoulders. A hush fell over the audience. Marcus Thorne sat at his front row table, preening, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He leaned towards his wife, whispering, "This is it. Get ready to applaud, my dear," loudly. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his kind eyes scanning the faces in the crowd, before they came to rest for a moment on Elara, who was standing by the side of the stage, ready to assist if needed, a silent figure in the wings. "Good evening," the president began, his voice warm but firm, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Tonight we have celebrated philanthropy and ambition. But I want to speak for a moment about a different set of virtues. I want to speak about service, about sacrifice, and about a form of humility so profound it actively shuns the spotlight." Paused, letting the words sink in. Night. We are honored to present the inaugural Guardian Scholarship. The scholarship will provide a full 4-year education to the children of fallen soldiers. It is a gift of immense generosity, a promise that the sacrifices of their parents will never be forgotten. A wave of polite applause rippled through the hall. Marcus clapped along, a look of smug anticipation on his face, certain this was all an elaborate preamble to his own award. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice growing stronger. This scholarship was endowed in its entirety by a single benefactor, a benefactor who has insisted on remaining anonymous. This person is not a tycoon, not a CEO, not someone whose name you would read in the financial pages. They are a veteran, a true hero, someone who has faced the very worst of humanity and responded with the very best of it. The president's gaze was now fixed, unwavering, on the side of the stage. This benefactor did not want any recognition. They only asked to be here tonight, to see the beginning of what their quiet sacrifice has built. They believe that service isn't about the accolades you receive in public, but about the work you do when no one is watching. He took a deep breath. And they are here with us now. Elara Vance, would you please join me on this stage? A confused electric murmur swept through the audience. Heads turned, searching, until they collectively landed on the woman in the simple gray maintenance uniform. Marcus Thorne let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. "Her," he spluttered to his wife, loud enough for those around him to hear. "The janitor? What is this? Some kind of pathetic joke?" Elara froze. This was her nightmare. The exposure, the fuss she had so desperately sought to avoid. She looked at Mr. Henderson, a silent plea in her eyes. But he met her gaze with one of profound respect and gentle encouragement. This was no longer just about her. It was about the scholarship, about the children, about the very meaning of honor. With a deep, steadying breath, she took a step forward, and then another. Walking out of the shadows and into the blinding spotlight, the light seemed to transform her, her humble uniform taking on the quality of a noble vestment. Mr. Henderson smiled kindly. "Elara," he said, his voice soft, but carrying across the now silent hall. "They don't understand. Perhaps you could show them." With slow, deliberate movements that seemed to take an eternity, Elara reached for the brass zipper on her gray work jacket. The sound it made as she pulled it down, zizzipu, is the only sound in the world. It was a sound of revelation. She parted the jacket, revealing the simple dark blue shirt she wore underneath. And there, pinned in a perfect, gleaming row just above her heart, was the truth. The light from the stage found them instantly, igniting them like a new constellation in the darkened hall. They were not costume jewelry or replicas. They were heavy with the weight of history, each one a testament to an act of unimaginable courage, a purple heart, its deep, solemn color, a symbol of a wound taken in the line of duty. A silver star, for gallantry in action. And there, at the very center, its iconic 5-pointed star, suspended from a ribbon of celestial blue, was the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest and most prestigious military decoration in the nation. A collective audible gasp swept through the room, a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum of stunned disbelief. Marcus Thorne's face, just moments before a mask of smug arrogance, had collapsed into a mess of slack-jawed confusion. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale and diminished. His wife Amelia covered her mouth with a trembling hand, her eyes wide with the dawning, sickening shame. The people who had chuckled at his cruel jokes now stared at him, their expressions a mixture of contempt and disgust. In the audience, an elderly man in a formal suit, a retired general whose posture still retained the memory of military discipline, slowly, reverently rose to his feet. His eyes were fixed on the medals on the woman wearing them. He began to clap. Not the polite, rhythmic applause of a gala, but a slow, powerful, percussive clap of profound respect. Another person rose, and then another. The applause spread. Not like a wave, but like a rising tide, swelling from a trickle into a thunderous, overwhelming roar. Soon, everyone in the great hall was on their feet, their ovation, a deafening apology, and a tribute all in one. Elara stood in the center of the storm, not with a triumphant smile, but with a quiet, solemn grace. Her expression was unchanged, her dignity a shield against the sudden onslaught of attention. This was not a victory she savored. It was a truth she had been forced to reveal. Her gaze drifted over the stunned faces past Marcus Thorne, settled on a group of students near the back, their young faces full of awe. They were the reason for this. They were the future she was investing in. Mr. Henderson gently offered her the podium's microphone. She took it, her hand as steady as it had been when she was cleaning the wine stain from the marble. When she spoke, her voice, the same quiet voice that had refused Marcus's money, filled the cavernous room with an effortless clarity. "Thank you," she said simply. "This isn't for me." She paused, her eyes finding the students again. "For them? The ones who can't be here? The ones who paid the ultimate price." She took a breath, her final words a profound lesson in 3 short sentences. Service is a duty, not a performance. It's about what you do when the world isn't looking. She placed the microphone back in its holder. She had said all that needed to be said. Marcus Thorne, now the object of 1,000 scornful glares, tried to make himself smaller, to shrink into his expensive suit. The humanitarian award he was supposed to receive now seemed like a grotesque joke. He was no longer a pillar of the community. He was a monument to superficiality, a small, cruel man who had tried to humiliate a giant. He and his wife made a move to leave a hasty, shameful retreat. But the eyes of the crowd followed them, their silent judgment more damning than any words. The gala continued, but its soul had been transformed. The brittle veneer of social posturing had been shattered, replaced by something genuine and deeply moving. Later, Elara was no longer on the periphery. She was surrounded by people, not fawning over a donor, but offering quiet, heartfelt thanks to a hero. She was seen speaking with a young woman, a prospective recipient of the Guardian Scholarship, her face for the first time that night, lit by a warm, encouraging smile. The story of that night would be told for years at Blackwood University, a moral tale about the simple gray uniform and the gleaming medals it concealed. A powerful reminder that a person's worth is not determined by their station in life, but by the honor they carry unseen within their heart.